Yep, you're listening to This Week with Tom Crandell, and that would be me. With my best producer friend Jeff is in studio tonight. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, knocking on heaven's door. Might be a Bob Dylan night. We'll see. But I would like to welcome you to the show. As always, the number is 441-9595. If we strike a nerve, care to chime in, you're welcome to join the program. You're listening to WBCK News Talk Radio 95.3. If you're in Kalamazoo, the number is 269-488-9595. You are welcome to give us a call. Well, this day in military... we've got a couple follow-up things from last week. Seems the feds confiscated some records from a news journalist. 4 teens beat and murdered a World War II veteran. Thought maybe we'd touch base on that. But first, and it was just, I don't know, ordained fate. I happened to have watched an hour-long show on the Civil War, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, because I never really knew much about the guy, other than his legend, Stonewall Jackson. Anyway, so the first item tonight, on this day in military history, November 3rd, 1741, the Augusta County Regiment was organized on this date. Men from this regiment would fight under Lieutenant Colonel George Washington during the French and Indian War, which occurred between 1755 and 1763. Again under Washington during the Revolutionary War, 1775-1783. And so I was reading this, and I thought, we're going to put that in there. And then it says, and under General Thomas Stonewall Jackson during the Civil War, where the regiment earned the nickname Stonewall Brigade. It still carries today. Its descendant unit, the 116th Infantry, became part of the 29th Infantry Division in 1917 and saw heavy fighting with it in both World Wars, including leading the assault wave on Omaha Beach on D-Day. In the War on Terror, different battalions of the 116th Infantry, still part of the 29th Division, have served on missions ranging from guarding the perimeter of Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, to teaching soldier skills and combat tactics to the members of the newly organized Afghan Army. Well, Stonewall Jackson, I graduated 17th in his class at West Point. Loved West Point, went on to teach at Virginia Military Institute, although he was not very well rated as an instructor. Much better artilleryman. But he cut his teeth in the very first battle, Battle of Bull Run as the Union calls it, or the First Manassas as the Virginians and many in the South still call it. And he held the ground called Henry Hill. It was high ground, and Lee had ordered him to hold his position. All the while down in front of him, another Confederate unit was taking it on the chin from the Union. And they cut their way through that Confederate unit, reached Stonewall Jackson's brigade up on Henry Hill, and at that point, I believe he charged, broke through the lines, caused the Union line to cave, and they retreated. And that's where he got his nickname Stonewall. It's interesting that it still carries the Stonewall Brigade today, but Thomas Jonathan Jackson was killed 23 months later by friendly fire. He was one not to lead from behind. He went out with his staff in the dead of night to survey the reforming Union lines on their way back. This must have been a couple of dozen horsemen. And units fired at him and hit him in the left arm, hit an artery. They were able to stop the bleeding, got him to a house. They amputated the arm, and over the next few days the wounds began to heal, but he contracted pneumonia. Anyway, quite a character, and it happened to have fit perfectly with the Augusta County Regiment organized on this date, November 3rd, 1741. And quite often I refer to Tom Paine. Turns out in November 3rd, 1794, Tom Paine was released from a Parisian jail With help from American Ambassador James Monroe, he was arrested for having offended the Robespierre faction. So he was a thorn in their side, too. Of course, he hated royalty all over the world, especially in England. That's why he fled England. But Tom Paine, never not a thorn in somebody's side. But that brings up that article about today's modern Tom Paine. I'm going to shift gears. A veteran D.C. investigative journalist says the Department of Homeland Security confiscated a stack of her confidential files. I did touch a base on this a little bit last week, I think, but they took files that were not in the search warrant, and then they gave it back. But they got her sources, and they're not talking to her now. I just hope they don't end up like Vince Foster. Remember Vince Foster? You do, don't you, Mr. Producer? Yes, I know it. All right, 1868, Republican Ulysses S. Grant was elected 18th president. And November 3rd, 1883, this just goes to show that the U.S. Supreme Court, just because of who they are, doesn't mean they get it right. The U.S. Supremes declared American Indians to be dependent aliens. I wonder if it was John Roberts' predecessor served on that court. Maybe. The U.S. Supreme Court declared American Indians to be dependent aliens. Way to go, Supremes. 1941, the combined Japanese fleet received top secret order number 1. That's a coded top secret order number 1. It's probably like number 3.2. In 34 days' time, Pearl Harbor is to be bombed along with Mayala, the Dutch East Indies, and the Philippines. So trouble is brewing in the Pacific. Now, November 3rd, 1979, I'm sure many of you will remember this. Some of you have heard of it. 63 Americans were taken hostage at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, Iran. This is, of course, after the U.S. president failed to support the Shah, who was our ally, and then just did nothing but express weakness across the world. And that's what Middle Eastern enemies do. They exploit it, and they did there. 1979. In 1992, November 3rd, 1992, a former, he was current sitting president at the time, but he was a candidate, and he made this pledge. He promised no new taxes. Right? Remember, you know who I'm talking about. That would be George H.W. Bush. But in 1992, William Jefferson Bill Clinton, governor of Arkansas, was elected 42nd president of the United States, defeating President Bush, who won 38% of the popular vote. So maybe missed promises. I heard a lawyer refer to it as fraud and inducement. They wanted to know if this person would claim that the president lied about you keep your health care plan. I don't know about lying, but fraud and inducement. Now there you go. Okay, November 3rd, 1997, UN officials brokered a deal between the rebels. Now this, I'm sure everybody was resting comfortably after they did this. November 3rd, 1997, UN officials brokered a deal between the rebels of Afghanistan and the Taliban to begin talks to end the Civil War. Okay. The UN brokered a deal. There you go. Peace through negotiations, not victory. All right, we're past a break. Stay tuned. We're going to be right back as soon as I find the right button there.
Be out there! Be out there! Be out there!
Time was, kids did what came naturally. Spending free time running barefoot through the grass, wading knee-deep in streams, climbing to the tallest branch. But today, American kids are more likely found texting, watching TV, or gazing at a computer screen. They spend more than 7 hours in front of electronic media. Something essential has been lost. Childhood's connection to the natural world. That's why National Wildlife Federation created the Be Out There movement. Kids move indoors causes a host of problems, from obesity to ADHD. But outdoor play can go a long way to improving kids' health, body, mind, and spirit. It helps them stay fit, enhances creativity and attention spans, and could even make them better students. Do your part. Be a part of Be Out There. There's a reason why they call it the great outdoors. Learn more at beoutthere.org.
Be out there!
Just hello, everyone, and my name is Tom Crandell, and you're listening to This Week with Tom Crandell on WBCK 95.3 News Talk Radio. Also, you catch this show, the whole station on iHeart. BCK's got a lot of great programming. They give us an opportunity to come in here and keep the studio warm for an hour or so every Sunday night, and we're very grateful for that. And if any of you ever wondered how we got the name This Week with Tom Crandell, I haven't a clue. Tim told me what it was going to be, right, Tim? Okay, and that's fine. But Mr. Jeff has been busy with a YouTube channel. Yes. Where if you catch the show on Access Vision, there is some editing that needs to be done. And the YouTube channel, there's no editing. Now, that doesn't mean you'll hear all the swearing, because there isn't any. You won't see any nudity. You won't see any extreme violence. Occasionally, Jeff throws a paperclip at me, but to remind me to take a break. But it is the raw uncut version, and you catch that there. You can also catch it on Facebook and Channel 16, 960 on Comcast here locally. So welcome back. My next up was this article from last week. I never got to it. 4 Mississippi teenagers have been charged with murder in the killing of a beloved World War II veteran who gained local fame for his home-cooked hot tamales. His name was Lawrence, nicknamed Shine, Thornton, 87. His funeral mass was celebrated, that's last week. This was published October 27th, so it's a little bit old. He was buried with full military honors at Green Lawn Memorial Gardens. He died October 20th, succumbing to the injuries he sustained after 4 teenagers pushed him down, quote, pushed him down and stole his wallet. Right. That's what they did. They just pushed him down. They didn't hurt him or anything. During an apparent mugging that occurred in the late afternoon 2 days earlier in the driveway of his longtime Greenville home. Now, the police chief notes that Terrence Morgan, now you notice the headline was 4 Mississippi teenagers. So, Terrence Morgan, aged 19, Edward Johnson, aged 19, Leslie Litt, aged 18, and Gablonsky Murray, aged 18, were all arrested Monday and charged with capital murder, robbery, and conspiracy to commit robbery. There's little known about the specifics of the run-in that cost Thornton his life, but the community has suffered tremendously. It was 1984. He lost his job as a Delta Electrical, an electrician for a local electric company, 37 years. And he lucked into the prosperous second profession of selling hot tamales. He must have had a lot of fun doing that. Anyway, he came up with his own recipe. But what a shame, those 4 kids, those 4 little teenagers. They're not 13, though. They're like 18 and 19. These are adults. But they sure are making very good adult decisions. And Mr. Thornton paid with his life. He served in World War II in the Pacific as a fireman first class aboard the minesweeper USS Herald. And came home and lived a wonderful life and became a target. And I've talked about that quite a bit, about identifying what it is we play or what it is we show that makes us a target. And it can be something as simple as how you carry your handbag or your purse, or talking on your cell phone as you're getting in your car out in a parking lot, especially Christmas season coming up. All kinds of things you shouldn't do. There are other things you should do. Look like a predator. Predators, if you notice in the wild, they always walk with their heads up. They're always looking left to right. Their eyes are always forward. And of course, gazelles, the prey, a lot of them, their heads are on 362 because they're looking for the lions. But many prey look like prey. They shuttle around, they huddle, and they avert looking at anybody. And that all sends a signal, a nonverbal communication that says, hey, come look at me. I'm kind of afraid. So if you just act like you're not afraid, carry your handbag slightly differently, you'll be all right. But the idea is to avoid looking like a target. And, of course, when you prepare for your own personal self-defense, whether it's leaving work, living in the home during the day, leaving a mall or a store, it's about being prepared, isn't it? Seems this came out October 29th. I was going to get to this last week and I couldn't, but I wanted to. A missing Kansas man spent his final days trapped in the wreckage of his van in a rural Utah ravine, writing goodbye letters to the family he abruptly left in early September. Apparently, he was 54. He was found October 18th by a hitchhiker. He had left his family in Kansas, and he was just flat out missing. But he's a retired salesman for Frito-Lay. They believe he fell asleep at the wheel of his Pontiac, Montana, and his minivan sped off the road when airborne, smashing into the side of the ravine. It came to rest upside down on the passenger side. Evidence suggests Welch was injured and unable to get out of the van. The medical examiner has not yet determined his cause of death. Even if he'd been able to get out, the nearest city was 50 miles west. I know, but he couldn't get out. Police believe he survived for days, maybe weeks, keeping a journal and writing notes to his wife and 4 sons. So what would you do? What would you say? Thousands of cars sped by on the nearby interstate without a clue. Welch's van couldn't be seen from the highway. It's very desolate. Police, of course, declined to describe what was in the notes, calling them a very private matter. His wife, though, provided a little bit further details on Twitter, and we're going to get to Twitter, too. Dave was entrapped in the vehicle down the 50-foot ravine. He wrote each of us a love note. She tweeted the day police found Welch. He knew he was dying, and there was no way out. Wow. What a position to be in. It seems like the closest we ever get to that is reading a news article, isn't it? And if any of the listeners here have been involved in a car accident and gone off a ravine and died, that'd be kind of spooky. But he wrote notes. So the question is, he was preparing when he knew he was dying, and he wrote notes. How many of you would like to write a note to a loved one, or me for that example? For that poor guy. Godspeed to you. All right. Next up, global warming. Oh, I saw this. This is pretty good. Let's see. Where is that? I knew I had that here. Global warming. Oh, it's going to hurt us. It causes. Let's see. Is that it? No, that's the stock market thing. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. I did have it. This comes from the Associated Press, November 3rd. Actually, Politico ran it. Associated Press did it. Many of the ills of the modern world, starvation, poverty, this is everything. Starvation, poverty, flooding, heat waves, droughts, war, and disease are likely to worsen as the world warms from man-made climate change. They don't call it global warming anymore, do they? I don't want to get on that bandwagon too much, and a good friend of mine asked me, he'd seen a glacier melt from 1850s to now. It's gone. And he was asking me if I thought that was from global warming. I said, no, I just think it's global change, climate change. Climate change happens all the time. Well, it seems that there's an intergovernmental panel on climate change, and guess what? They've won a Nobel Peace Prize. That's on their resume. And they're going to issue a report next March on how global warming is already affecting the way people live and what will happen in the future, including a worldwide drop in income. A leaked copy of the draft of the summary of the report appeared online Friday on a climate skeptic's website. Governments will spend the next few months making comments about the draft. All right, Carnegie Institution climate scientist Chris Field, who heads the report, told the AP on Saturday, "We've seen a lot of impacts and they've had consequences, and we will see more in the future." Well, the report says scientists have high confidence, especially in what it calls certain key risks. People dying from warming and sea rise-related flooding, especially in big cities. Now, the last big city that had a flood from rising seas was it New York? No, it wasn't New York. Was it any city on the eastern? I don't think Mr. Producer Jeff F. was. It must be somewhere in the world where there's no media, because they're keeping it a secret from us. Here we go. Famine. They have high confidence that famine will increase because of temperature and rain changes, especially for poorer nations. And farmers going broke because of lack of water. Well, actually, if you look at what the EPA is doing with our water regulations that they're trying to do, that might be a reason that some farmers don't have water. All right, bottom of the hour, we got to take a break. Be right back.
Did you know that having diabetes puts you at risk for vision loss? I'm Dr. Robert Melendez for the American Academy of Ophthalmology. I see firsthand how vision problems can affect lives. We are urging adults with diabetes to strictly control their blood sugar levels and have dilated eye exams every year. Know your risks. Save your sight. To learn more about diabetes and eye health, visit geteyesmart.org.
Cans, water bottles, and clothes. These forms of aid cost more to ship than you think. Cash donations provide immediate and effective relief to those who need it, without the shipping costs. If we all do our part, together, we can provide help across the world. To learn more, check out CIDI.org.
Work on Maggie's farm no more.
Yeah, climate change is going to wipe his job out. Way to go, Bob. You blew it, man. You drove a car and you killed the earth. All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Tom Crandell, and you're listening to This Week with Tom Crandell on WBCK News Talk Radio. The number is 441-9595. If you're listening, want to chime in. Let's see. Farmers growing broke because of lack of water, infrastructure failures because of extreme weather, dangerous and deadly heat waves are worsening, certain land and marine ecosystems are failing. We have heat waves. They come and they go. But the question was put to me about global warming. Do you believe it? I said, no, well, explain global warming during the Dark Ages. Caller on line 1, what's your name? Welcome to the program.
Tom, my name is Reggie.
Hey, Reggie. Thanks for calling up, man. What's going on?
Oh, not a whole lot, but you were on a topic that I have a bit of interest in. And I noticed that there were somewhere between 13 and 20 hurricanes forecast for this year. Can you name any hurricanes for this year?
Reggie, I have listeners in New Orleans, and I was hoping that one would even come close, so we could get a first-hand report, Reggie. But I think it was pretty bleak for the hurricane activity. What ended up? They predicted what you said, up to 13 to 17.
13 to 20.
13 to 20.
Were what was forecast, and I can't name one. Can you?
I can't name one either.
But now, yet these are the same people that can forecast global warming. How can those people that cannot predict what's going to happen 6 months in advance predict what's going to happen centuries in advance?
Reggie, what do you suppose? This is a real honest, sincere question. What do you suppose the motivation is for this dingbat crowd to be running around like Chicken Little, sky is falling, sky. What motivation, is it really just a wealth transfer, richer nations to poorer nations, UN being involved in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? Or what do you think motivates them?
Okay, I think one of the things that motivates them is that the government gives grant money to colleges and universities to prove that global warming is a fact. And if I were a college professor and I wanted more money for my department, I'll bet you that I could go out and manipulate the data, and I could come up with a scenario which would say that the globe is warming.
And then you might get a $350,000 grant to implement your proposed study.
My grant money would come again the next year, and the next year, and the next year.
And then you could also put it on your resume.
Sure.
Hey, I got a grant based on my writing. So that makes me smart, kind of like Scarecrow. Reggie, I know. I'm when I saw that about all these ills that this climate, of course, they don't dare use global warming anymore. They've been soundly run off the planet on that one.
No.
So the chameleon just starts to call it climate change now.
And these people that, science, you have to prove science. You don't get to vote on science. You have to prove that, and they're not wanting to prove it anymore.
No, you get like half the scientists say they can prove it, and then the other half takes their data, they can't prove it. And I think it's Joe Girardi is from, I think, National Weather Service. He's a real skeptic on this climate change boondoggle, as are you, Reggie. And I'm with you 100% because I don't believe the global warming during the Dark Ages. Was that due to your car, Mr. Producer? I don't think, or Reggie, was that due to your car?
Well, I don't think it was due to my car.
I don't think so either. I don't think you were driving much back then. Reggie.
No, I wasn't.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate you calling. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show.
You bet.
Have a great
Take
night.
care.
Okay.
Bye now.
All right, Reggie, yeah. Now, I detect a bit of a southern draw there. And, after watching some of the Civil War stuff and learning about Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee, and especially Jackson, for example, he was an officer in the Union Army, or at the time it was the old American Army. But his state was under attack. That starts to soak in. That's how much states' rights mattered back then. Is you would go against your ever-growing, powerful central government, and you'd stand up for your state. I'm not sure many people. I think that's been lost. Now, I know last week, we're going to move on. I know last week we talked about the Affordable or Unaffordable Care Act, the, I call it Obamacare. And it's just a debacle from top down. And I saw an article, was posted actually back in February 2010. There was a UK health care debacle where over time, in a filthy, blood-spattered hospital, over 1,200 patients died a slow death from neglect. It was at Mid-Staffordshire National Health System Trust. They put government targets and cost-cutting ahead of patient care. No one has suffered any formal sanction. Some have retired on lucrative pensions. They found other new jobs. The former chief executive, he left with $1 million pension, 6 months salary, and a reported £400,000 payoff. He never even had to give evidence to the Inquirer, which detailed the scale of the scandal. Not a single individual has been publicly blamed. The inquiry found that patients were left unwashed in their own filth for up to a month as nurses ignored their request to use the toilet or change their sheets. by the way, the article kicks off with, imagine if we put the Department of Motor Vehicles in charge of your health care. Just imagine what the quality of your health care would be like. Britain's system isn't perfect. The U.S.'s system is not perfect. But the U.S.'s system before this was the best one in the world. Of course, that won't stop the opposition as they try to re-engineer this healthcare system. But let's see, they were routinely neglected. Here's some of the other ones. 4 members of one family, including a newborn baby girl, died within 18 months after blunders at the hospital. Medics discharged patients hastily out of fear they risked being sacked for delaying the discharge. Wards were left filthy with blood, discarded needles, and used dressings, while bullying managers made whistleblowers too frightened to come forward. Staff numbers were allowed to fall dangerously low, causing nurses to neglect the most basic care. Requests for assistance to use a bedpan or to get to or from the toilet were not responded to. Some families were left at... This is what England... This is where their Affordable Care Act... This is where it's progressed to. And, of course, one family lost 4 members. Kelsey Lintern was at the center of one of the worst tragedies in the hospital's appalling catalog. She lost 4 members of her family within 18 months, her grandmother, uncle, sister, and 6-day-old baby. Oh, that poor thing. Now, she says she almost became the 5th victim when a nurse tried to give her a drug called pethidine while she was in labor, despite her medical notes and a wristband clearly stating she was allergic to the drug. The story began in 2007 when her baby daughter Naya had to be delivered by her own grandmother because of a distracted midwife was not looking. Baby wasn't breathing, but she was resuscitated, then discharged by a junior pediatrician just 2 days later, despite the family's fears she was seriously ill. Baby didn't make it. Her sister died of lung, bone, and lymph cancer, which had taken 18 months to be diagnosed. You don't suppose that was delay in seeing your doctor? Do you suppose? Oh my goodness. Tests revealed that Mrs. Gethin had markers in her blood, which can indicate cancer. But it would have taken a blood test. It would have taken a doctor's visit to catch that. And she was only sent for scans that look for tumors. This other fellow, her uncle, 48, died in January 2008 after his intestine was accidentally pierced in an operation for bowel cancer. That happens actually quite a bit. Well, it's not quite a bit. It's like a plane that crash lands. That makes the news. Of course, the coroner ruled the death was accidental. Her grandmother died hungry and dehydrated after suffering a stroke. She was left in her own messes during her final days, and the family said the dehydration was caused by staff failing to give her adequate fluids. Gee, yeah, I mean, an 80-year-old woman who's suffering a stroke, you need fluids. 3 days. But it's rife with it, and, it's probably coming to ours. But aside from the healthcare issue, this fellow named Justin Hadley logged on to healthcare.gov to evaluate his insurance options after his health plan was canceled. What he discovered was an apparent security flaw that disclosed eligibility letters addressed to individuals from another state. He was in complete shock. He's from North Carolina, buys his insurance on the individual market, and as we have come to find out, the individual market owners are the target of this to be put out of business. And of course, might get into this if we have time. We've had a little Facebook conversation with our friend Dan, and he's blaming it all on the insurance companies. But the problem is, if you don't get these individual policyholders supporting the sick people, then the thing doesn't fly. Well, it turns out one of the letters this Justin Hadley got was dated October 8th, acknowledged the receipt of an application to a health insurance marketplace. One of the letters was addressed to a man named Thomas Dougal, a lawyer from Elgin, South Carolina. This Hadley contacted him and showed him, hey, guess what? I have your information. So if I were you, I don't know, you better think long and hard about that. And of course, the solution to all this, depending on which side you talk to, is wildly different. Even the Republicans said that our system needed work. And in fact, I was looking at some reports, it's up to our insurance market before the Affordable Care Act was regulated 70-80% by the federal government. hardly a free market healthcare system. The insurance companies are equally regulated, 70 to 80%. And of course, the biggest insurer in the country, that would be Medicare. They turn down more procedures than all the other insurance companies combined, just because of the sheer numbers on Medicare and Medicaid. Well, it's been an ongoing problem that doctors are paid much less, and consequently, some are refusing to treat Medicare and Medicaid, certainly Medicaid. And a Virginia Democrat has a solution to that. There was a debate, this would have been November 1st, in Virginia. A state delegate candidate, Kathleen Murphy, said that since many doctors are not accepting Medicaid and Medicare patients, she advocates making it a legal requirement for those people to be accepted. She did not recognize that the payments are inadequate to cover the doctor's costs. They always change. That was let's see, okay, This is a conversation that's been going. Mike Cooey thought it was very, very telling. Yeah, okay. Mr. Dan says, pertaining to, quote, if it's so good, why do we want more? Meaning I had made a comment about if the ACA was so good, why do you want single payer? Shouldn't ACA be enough? No, he wants single payer. So he writes back, pertaining to if it's so good, why do we want more? The ACA is merely a step in the direction of a single payer system. We couldn't get single payer passed with all the obstructionism from the right wing nuts. So this is a compromise, but we will end up with single payer. And I asked, compromise? I said, that's funny. The Democrats had both houses and the executive branch. Who did they compromise with? Not one Republican voted for it. Quit changing the law. Congress needs to do that. So the conversation on the street between citizens is, there's no shortage of that. All right, that's enough of this healthcare moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, we've got some issues on Detroit. Hey, dental tourism. Panetta's in Israel. Oh, and speaking of totalitarian governments that want to mandate what businesses do, we got an article here from Cuba, shuttering private theaters. So we'll maybe learn more about that after this break. Stay tuned, don't go away, we'll be right back.
I've changed apartments several times. My roommates have always been trouble. Now, because of the economy, I've had to move back home. When my mom gets drunk, she tells me everything I do is going to fail. I get into arguments with her about her drinking. Dad goes to Al-Anon family groups. I didn't think Al-Anon would work for me, but every time I go, I feel better. If someone's drinking bothers you, you might find help in an Al-Anon family group meeting right here in our community. I found support there. You can too. Call 1-888-4-AL-ANON or visit alanonfamilygroups.org.
All right, Cuba shutters private theaters, threatens other businesses. Cuba closed dozens of home-based movie theaters. Turns out they have to run them out of the homes because it's really a communist government that knows better for its people than the people do. And so there were no theaters, or very little, and they were crummy ones. Cuba closed dozens of home-based movie theaters on Saturday. This comes from Reuters, and so it's pretty new, as in like yesterday. Reaffirmed its plans to end the private sale of imported goods as communist authorities pressed for, quote, order, discipline, and obedience. Well, I'll bet that's what reminds me of Animal Farm. All animals are equal, except some animals are more equal than others. And if you recall, the rules kept changing. It was no animals can sleep in beds. And then it became, well, no animal can sleep in beds with blankets. And, of course, that was when the pigs took over. Anyway, a government statement, I mean, there are all kinds of statements being issued. Home-based theaters and video games will stop immediately in any type of self-employment. That's a local euphemism for small business. The showing of movies, including in 3D salons, and likewise the organization of computer games, has never been authorized. Yeah, it's all been kind of under the table. And now they claim they're actually, doing great. But here's Marlene, a Havana housewife, said her neighbor was planning to open a 3D salon. The state has no 3D theaters, so what is their problem? Sometimes the government seems to want to make our lives worse for the fun of it, she said, asking her last name not be used, lest she end up in a Cuban gulag. So, Marlene, if I were you, I wouldn't be talking to any Western reporters. Isn't that something? They're shuttering private theaters. Not a whole lot different than mandating that you need to take business from somebody. You need to accept Medicare and Medicaid patients. I don't see a whole lot of difference between that. As we come up to the end of the show, if you do, 4419595. The word man Joe did get one in under the wire, blandish. He says the president is looking for some blandish. That would be praise or cajoling a compliment out of someone. Now, okay, there's not going to be Detroit bankruptcy proposal. We got a couple minutes to spend on this. It was the politicians, not longtime city workers like Olivia Gillen, who brought Detroit to the brink of insolvency, but now Gillen can only watch as lawyers negotiating the Motor City's bankruptcy bid place a new value on her hard-earned pension, 16 cents on the dollar. Okay, those who can give can take away. It was the politicians who spent the money. And I'm sorry. That's going to be hard. These people retired. They were expecting that. And she says it's wrong on every possible level. Yes, it is. But I would lay the blame at the feet of the people who kept electing those politicians to give them this. The same as you can't blame GM in years past. You can't blame the unions for that, for the contracts and what. Yeah, they got great contracts. All they were doing was asking for it. Management gave it to them. So don't blame the unions. Oh, they got bailed out. We're going to lose $9 billion on that. But some people are going to be hit hard, she says, yeah. She has to change the way she lives. Yes. I see people every day in Battle Creek have to do that. Mackinac Center for Public Policy, which sounded a warning about Detroit's fiscal problems more than 10 years ago, said the old-style defined benefit pensions that have long been a centerpiece of civil service leave pensioners at the mercy of politicians because they didn't control it. It was a defined benefit pension plan. They deducted it from your paycheck, and then they kept it. And then they spent the city into bankruptcy, and the money isn't there. I think that's called an unfunded liability. I'm sorry. The U.S. has about $100 trillion in unfunded liability. And, of course, it'll wash down to the states. 16 cents on the dollar could be a message to unions, which previously refused to negotiate cuts. We're going to find out here in the next days, weeks, and months. But 16 cents on the dollar. All right, we're coming up to the end of the show. Reggie from Battle Creek, I'd like to thank you for listening. I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in. I think we might end the day. Of course, it's dark out. Sure hope you changed your clocks. If not, you're a little late. But I would like to thank you all for listening. Catch us on Facebook or on Access Vision. We will see you next week.